Hello YouTube and welcome to another video. Today we're gonna be covering the new episodes of the Winx Club reboot. So I was originally going to cover various different topics and I was going to make a separate video on each of them, just like I did on the first part of the reboot, which was admittedly much longer, and I didn't actually cover all of the episodes and all of the topics I originally planned. But I was going to do this in topics, and then I was editing the first video, which was about Diaspro, and I was editing it and I realized it was so boring. There just wasn't enough of material there to have an interesting long form video, and I figured that for the second part of the reboot of the Magic is Back series it would be better to do one video where I just talk about all of my thoughts that I felt were worth mentioning. And I'm gonna be making this video into chapters, so YouTube allows me to make videos into chapters, so in the description you can see the different chapters, and you can also just skip to the ones that interest you, although I am hoping that all of them will interest you. So first off, I'm gonna talk about animation. There's not really much to say about the animation other than the fact that I don't think anyone likes it. I watched all of the 6 episodes with my mom and this came up constantly that the old animation style is just so much better, and I don't know anyone who likes the new animation style better than the old one. I barely have heard anyone say that the new animation style is good at all. It's very generic, it doesn't set Winx Club apart as much as its original animation style, but even more than that, it's just bad. It's just not very good quality computer animation. The way the characters walk is straight up hilarious sometimes. They really move like computer game characters, and in computer games, you know, the player has to move the character, so it's okay if you sometimes get like these funny movements where characters don't walk quite naturally, but in an animation there is really no excuse for this weird walking movement. It just looks so unnatural and like you're not controlling the character properly. There really were some animations that looked uncanny and unnatural and just straight up not even boring but bad. I believe Unicorn of War had a thumbnail where they showed the little young Bloom from the flashback, and yeah, that Bloom does look horrifying and that Bloom does look bad. So I'm gonna say it right now in the beginning that the animation looks horrible, and we can get that out of the way, and I think most people agree with that sentiment. And now let's just leave the animation aside and focus on the plot. By the way, everything from this point on is gonna have spoilers, so if you don't want to get spoiled, then this is the point to click away now. There are spoilers ahead. I don't really understand what they're doing. In theory, they could be retelling the Winx Club story in a way that's better and has less plot holes and is just more coherent, but I don't think they're always managing that either. And they are sort of trying to strike this balance between a new story and retelling of the old story, and sometimes it just doesn't make sense. In the very first episode of the new episodes of part 2, by the way, Netflix, which is the main platform where you can see this, categorizes this as season 2, and I was really confused because I got Netflix specifically for this, and then I saw that they only had 13 episodes and I was like, what the hell? And then I realized that they put the new episodes in season 2, so by Netflix's own categorization, this is technically season 2. In the very first episode, Truth About Bloom, Bloom goes back home to find out about what's going on. Why does she suddenly have a brother? She doesn't have a brother in the original series, but we all already know as the audience, if we have watched the original series, that Bloom is gonna find out that she's adopted. Honestly, I'm surprised that she didn't already suspect this, but maybe this isn't a thing that people naturally suspect. I certainly wouldn't suspect it from my parents. So yeah, and we do have the hindsight of 2020 of knowing that Bloom is adopted because she is adopted in the first series. It would be more of a shock if she wasn't adopted for us as the audience. But Bloom is going to Earth to find out that she's adopted, and the series makes a great deal about bringing the rest of the Winx along, which is something that didn't happen in the original series. In the original, Bloom goes completely alone and finds this truth out on her own, and the Winx aren't there to support her, and the show makes a big point to get the Winx along. But then the Winx being there is completely pointless because the show makes another point of getting Bloom alone when the Tricks attack. So in the end, they are making this change, they are making an effort to make this change, and in the end this changes nothing, and in fact they need to do more writing to revert the situation to what it was originally so that the plot could work better. And this is one of those instances where I was literally like, what are you doing? Why are these changes necessary? These changes aren't helping anyone, they're just creating more fluff. And this is the way I feel about the plot of this season in general. All of the new episodes, but also some of the old episodes, you're just creating change for the sake of it not being exactly the same, but then it's still pretty much exactly the same, just not as good. Moving forward, we're gonna be talking about characters specifically. I started watching the new episodes and I was explaining to my mom what happens in the first ones, and like she has seen the original Winx series, so I just explained the differences. And then I saw Robin and I was like, oh yeah, you're here as well. I completely forgot about you. I don't mind the idea of there being new specialists, and I don't mind the idea of there being female specialists. I think it's a good idea. She's not part of the Winx, she is part of the specialists, and I think she could create an interesting dynamic, but she is so forgettable. I literally forgot about her. I wish that she was in some way more interesting, more relevant to the plot, but again, as we spoke in the plot section, because they are sort of trying to strike this balance between old and new, and they are largely retelling the old story. There really isn't space for these new characters unless you make like very thought out space for them, and I feel like they haven't made thought out space for Robin. Maybe they have some future plans for Robin, but currently Robin is just so forgettable. I feel like I should make an entire video on Damien, but I don't want to. I understand why people are mad about Damien's existence. Some people are saying that it sort of takes away from the girl power of Winx Club, that adding this male main character sort of takes away from this unapologetic girliness of Winx Club, where it's all about the girl characters, and I do kind of see it, but I also think that Winx Club has historically had this issue where a lot of the male characters are either villains or simply love interests and don't have a lot of character of their own. I do think that Damien is actually one of the better written characters for the reboot. He does have a character, he's Flora's love interest as well, but he's very clearly his own person, which I think is interesting because we haven't had a love interest in Winx Club that also very clearly has their own plot and things happening to them outside of them being the love interest completely. Like Damien has a whole life outside of also being interested in Flora, and a lot of the specialists normally usually are only love interests. We don't see a lot of their lives outside of being love interests to the girls, and I think that's something you could technically criticize Winx Club for, and this is something that the addition of Damien technically adds and makes things more interesting. But regardless of that, I don't find Damien that endearing that I would want to do an entire video on him. I also wanted to mention that I don't like his new hairstyle. I think his like casual form is quite nice, it's quite well designed, I don't mind it, but his new hairstyle is just horrible. He got that one and I was instantly like, what are we doing? The Twix in the original series get a whole season to be their own villains, where they are the main villains, where they are the main threat. And this doesn't happen in The Magic is Back, because here clearly the biggest bad is Vexius. And the Tricks start out as being sort of underlings of Vexius, and then they realize they don't want to work for Vexius. So the Tricks kind of never get their own moment to shine as their own main villains. And I think this makes them a whole lot less threatening. I think their characterization is also completely different in the reboot. I could do a whole separate video on how they are different in the reboot versus the original. If that is something you're interested in, let me know. But they definitely feel less intimidating, and they definitely feel more like they are the same age as the Winx girls. They definitely feel less experienced. Icy steals Bloom's dragonfire and can't control it. And I think that's quite interesting. I did like that plotline, and I did like that they added that. I think that added an interesting dimension. I wish it had gone on longer. I wish that they had done more with it, but they might still, because there are more episodes to come. But I actually thought that was very interesting. But again, that whole plotline shows Trix as less capable, less powerful. So if you like Trix as these wonderful, strong, independent threats, these villains who are really a threat to the magical dimension, then I think The Magic is Back is gonna disappoint you a lot. But I do still like the fact that they added this plot line where Icy can't control Bloom's power, because Bloom's power is supposed to be so immense and powerful. And this plotline, while it makes Icy look weaker than she is in the original, it also really highlights the fact that Bloom's powers are that strong and are that powerful and are worth fighting for and are worth stealing, because they are so all-powerful. And I think it's actually, I like the plotline where Icy can't control her powers. I think that was interesting, that was unexpected, that was something that I would have enjoyed writing fanfiction out of as a kid. That is something that would be interesting to write fanfiction out of still, maybe to this day. It's an interesting line, and Bloom wanting to help Icy and wanting to partly take back her power because she seemingly doesn't want Icy to die from this power. It creates a really interesting situation, and I think that was one of the most interesting situations in the entire 6 episodes. That was one of the things I liked and I was interested in, and that felt like a thought out thing to add that they hadn't explored before, but what could have been explored in the original series as well, because Bloom's power is supposed to be that powerful. So it is interesting that in the original they just sort of master it. So I did really like that, and I liked how Icy was upset with herself for not being able to master it and not wanting to admit the fact that she couldn't master it, and like even her sisters having a bit of an argument with her and feeling kind of uneasy about the way Icy was acting. And I think that was a very interesting relationship dynamic, and I think there was a lot of really interesting relationship dynamics going on there. I also think that this series is giving us a lot of these sort of Icy Bloom moments, which I would have loved as a kid. I wouldn't say that I shipped Icy and Bloom as a child, but I definitely would have loved moments that showed the potential of them becoming friends in different circumstances, or even like any sort of potential for reconciliation and working together. I loved that kind of stuff as a child. I still kind of love it. I really love the idea of Bloom seeing Icy as a person. I feel like there are a lot of cool and interesting Icy and Bloom moments in this series that I am really enjoying, and that is one of the things I am really enjoying about the reboot. So that's fun. And I kind of hope that they don't leave this entire idea of Icy struggling with Bloom's powers there. Obviously, Icy would have to regain Bloom's powers for it to become a thing again, but I thought that that was such an interesting thing to happen, and I wish that it would have gone on longer. there is an entire episode, quite a large arc about Tecna and her feelings and going to Zenith, going to Tecna's home planet. And I do like that episode quite a lot as well, because I always like episodes where we can see the magical dimension and we can see the fairies' homes. And Tecna having these two android friends was also quite an interesting addition. I am surprised by this episode, maybe not in the best of ways, because first of all, I feel like in this episode they try to establish that Tecna has locked away her feelings and now she is experiencing feelings for the first time, but she clearly experiences feelings in the first part as well, so to me that just doesn't make sense. Second of all, it seems that Tecna's feelings are something that she is able to unlock over time more and more, and is now slightly unlocking, and I just don't like that entire storyline, because I thought that they were making Tecna someone who struggles with opening up and showing her emotions, simply because of maybe the culture she comes from or the sort of person that she just naturally is. And I think that would be much more relatable to people, and I think that would make her feel much more human in this magical world than saying that she has some sort of technical issue or some sort of that she has made the conscious choice to lock away her feelings, and her feelings can be unlocked by using some sort of technology, by undoing some sort of spell, rather than through personal growth. I think it would be really great for people to see a character who struggles with socialization, simply because that is the environment that she grew up with, or that is the sort of person that she is. And in the first part, they seem to be really strongly advocating for this message that despite the fact that Tecna struggles with her emotions and isn't the most outwardly extroverted person, her friends still like her. Her friends still know that she has feelings, which I feel like is a whole plot point in season 1 or part 1. So what are we doing now? Basically retconning something already. So I felt like they were giving this really great message to children that it's okay, even if you're not the most extroverted person, and if you struggle socially, your friends will still love you, and you will still find people who accept you and who take you as part of their group without you having to become a different person. But now we're basically kind of saying that this was a conscious choice, that Tecna's feelings were locked away, and this isn't in fact what she is really like as a person. Or that, you know, her feelings can be unlocked via some sort of mechanism rather than personal growth. And I really didn't like that addition. And again, I just feel like Tecna had emotions prior to this, so it didn't make sense to say that she has emotions now when she has clearly had emotions earlier as well. They make this whole spiel about Tecna experiencing this and that emotion for the first time, but they are emotions that she seemingly already experienced in part 1. Tecna was, in my opinion, one of the better written characters in part 1 for the reasons that I mentioned, that she is so different and she stands out and she gives a good message to children that you don't have to be extroverted. And I feel like this new episode kind of takes away from that and just makes it seem like, oh, she's just like that because of this spell or mechanism, or the fact that her feelings are locked out. And I feel like that episode took something away from Tecna's character rather than adding to it, even though we technically got more lore. Let me know how you feel about that entire arc. I would be interested to know. So Sky breaks up with Diaspro, which I think is great. Diaspro in the reboot, in comparison to the original, is a much less complicated character. In the reboot, we don't really see Sky having any sort of political reasons to be with her. In fact, we don't really understand why Sky is with her in the first place, but Sky breaks up with her, and Diaspro immediately goes into the deep end. She immediately goes into the crazy X territory. She isn't as complex as she is in the original series, because in the original series you could argue that Diaspro wasn't the one to blame for the situation in the beginning at all, and that in the beginning Bloom was in the wrong attacking her, and that Diaspro is only in the wrong starting season 3. But in this version, she goes off to the deep end right away. I do think that complicated characters are more interesting, but I also think that if they want to take this straightforward approach with Diaspro, then at least take an approach that's consistent. And I guess they're doing a consistent Crazy X thing. Not a huge fan of that. I'm also sad that we didn't get a transformation sequence for Diaspro at all. Either the transformation sequence where she transforms into a fairy, or a proper transformation sequence from fairy to a witch. Like, we do see the transformation happening, but there is no like musical sequence. And I know that those sequences are after done, so they could be reused for animations, but we still like the transformation sequences, or at least I still like them as well. So I am happy that Sky breaks up with Diaspro. Diaspro then decides that she wants to be a witch. And this again was one of my favorite parts of the new storyline, that Diaspro decides to be a witch, and she goes to Griffin and she's like, hey, I want to be a witch. And Griffin is like, no, you were decided upon that you are a fairy, and the chance that you are actually a witch is so minuscule. Do you think that you're that special? And Diaspro thinks that she is that special, so she goes to the tricks. The tricks only offer to help her if she can do damage to Bloom or take Bloom down in Palladium Simulator. She doesn't manage that. She does try, she does follow their lead, but she doesn't manage that, so the tricks say that they're not gonna help her. And she decides that she doesn't need that help, and that she will become a witch regardless. And despite the fact that she becomes evil straight up, I think that is a really empowering and fun message. Like, the Griffin says that she is wrong, which is cool to see. There is a video on YouTube called Diaspro Transforms into a Witch. I'm going to link that down below. So I looked into it, and apparently the video is originally by a TikTok user called Winx Pierre. So I'll link that in the description instead, just in case the YouTube uploader is a re-uploader, which I think it might be.
She could actually do it. Apparently, I was mistaken. Never underestimate the power of someone who chooses their own path, even when that leads to darkness.
So Farragonda says, never underestimate the power of someone who chooses their own path, even when that leads to darkness. And I think that's so cool. I think that's so empowering. And I think it's also really interesting because in the original series, we see Myrta, who doesn't want to be a witch, who wants to become a fairy, and does become a fairy. So we know, even though that's a different universe, but we still technically know that within the magic universe of Winx Club, it is possible to become a fairy from being a witch. So it is interesting to know that it is also possible to become a witch from being a fairy, and I think it's really interesting that they show this. I still hope that they bring in Myrta as well and show the opposite as well, that you can come over from the darkness to the light, even though we haven't seen Myrta so far at all. And I feel like Althea needs more students in general. There seems to be like 20 students in Althea. But setting that aside, I think that this transformation sequence for Diaspro and this message that you can be whatever you want to be, even if that's being evil, is pretty cool and pretty empowering, and I felt like that part was pretty cool. I actually really like Griffin. I like Griffin in the original as well, and I feel like they're adding to Griffin substantially in this version, and Griffin is an interesting character in this version as well, and she seems to be in some way the stepmother to the Tricks, or like their caretaker or guardian, which very much wasn't the case in the original, and I think that that's an interesting addition as well. And I'm looking forward to seeing them potentially doing something with it, because they have sort of alluded to it several times, but they haven't done anything. I hope that they will do something with it in the future. I also briefly wanted to mention the dark fairies. there is a scene in which Althea is overtaken by Vex's dark magic. And I am happy that that scene exists because Bloom fights against the urge to become Dark Bloom again. And I feel like that adds to the original Dark Bloom arc in the reboot, because originally it felt very fan service, very one-off, and I felt like they weren't gonna do anything else with it, and I was disappointed. But now at least there was another time where Bloom struggled against becoming a dark fairy, so now it feels a little less empty to me. The other fairies became overwhelmed by Vex's power and became evil, but they don't transform, which to me is a massive letdown. A massive unused opportunity on Rainbow's part, because I feel like they knew what they were doing with Bloom when they gave her this casual Dark Bloom outfit. I felt like they knew that Dark Bloom is popular, so they're gonna capitalize on that and give her like a Dark Bloom casual outfit as well, which was cool. And by this logic, once the spell took over the other Winx, they should have gotten a casual Dark Winx outfit as well. And it would have been cool if they did. And I'm disappointed that they didn't, because it also just kind of breaks the continuity a little bit for me. But yeah, these are my thoughts regarding the new episodes of the Winx Club reboot. Let me know in the comments below if you have already watched these episodes, which one was your favorite, what parts of the reboot do you enjoy, which parts you maybe don't enjoy. I feel like there's a lot of negativity around it anyway, so let me know if there is something that you did enjoy about the new reboot. Did you enjoy any of these aspects that I talked about? Would you like me to do a video talking about any of these topics more in depth? I feel like I could technically do one about the tricks. And of course there will be more episodes to The Magic is Back, because everything is left pretty open-ended. I was hoping that the animation would end up being better because they kept postponing it, but in my opinion it is even worse this time. If you have enjoyed this video and want to see more Winx content, then make sure to subscribe, leave this video a like. I'll see you in another video. Here are some other videos you might want to check out. Bye!